During a sleepy literature class, Haruki sits half asleep at his desk, while the teacher goes on with the lesson and the room remains quiet. Haruki introduces himself as an ordinary 18-year-old third-year high school student, neither especially ugly nor handsome, and says he is currently in classical Japanese literature class. He says the warm, satisfying lunch left him drifting towards sleep, while the teacher's calm lecture only pushed him closer to dreamland. That is why, when something strange suddenly appeared across the classroom floor, he could only stare at it blankly. The class erupts in shock as glowing circles spread beneath the desks. Students panic in confusion, and even the teacher freezes. Haruki finds himself collapsed on an unfamiliar stone floor, still sluggish and unable to move, and wonders in disbelief what happened. As his classmates groan around him and armored figures stand nearby, Haruki anxiously asks where they are and what is going on. He then hears a robed figure declare that the summoning was a success and order the armored guards to take them all away, while the others react in fear. As the guards drag the stunned students along, Haruki can only think this cannot be real and asks in confusion what is happening. Haruki struggles wildly against the situation, twisting in panic as he tries to resist but cannot break free. Haruki stares in disbelief as he realizes he has been strapped into a restraining chair and all he can manage is a confused reaction. As someone orders the procedure to begin, Haruki looks around the stone room in alarm and wonders what this place is. A classmate suddenly lets out a piercing scream as violent energy bursts around him, turning the scene chaotic and terrifying. Haruki overhears the men in white coats identify that student as a samurai class summon and note that it is not a rare class, leaving Haruki shaken. The word samurai echoes in Haruki's mind as he struggles to process what it could possibly mean. A moment later, Haruki is roughly thrown into a cell-like room while armored guards lock him inside without explanation. He stares at the locked door in stunned silence as the sound of it being secured confirms he has been imprisoned. Lying on the floor, Haruki bitterly thinks that if this is not a dream, then someone should at least explain what is happening, though he suspects this kind of absurd situation only happens in novels. Then, a bespectacled girl appears nearby, quietly asking what is actually happening, and Haruki jolts in surprise when he notices her. As he looks at her more closely, Haruki realizes she is in the same class as him and remembers that her name is probably Inoue Shizuka. Haruki recalls that Inoue Shizuka is the quiet girl his classmates call plain because of her thick glasses and braids, and he realizes he has barely spoken to her before. As the two remain alone in the cell, Haruki admits that her question makes sense, but he still has no clear answer. Haruki honestly tells Inoue that he does not have a clue either, and she quietly accepts that. Haruki says he can at least make one guess, returning to the thought that had already crossed his mind. He suggests that their entire class may have been summoned to another world, leaving Inoue startled by the idea. Inoue says she has objections and bluntly calls the idea unrealistic, though her silence shows she is still taking it seriously. A tray is shoved in with a harsh clang, and someone curtly tells them to eat. While they force themselves to eat, Haruki complains that the meal is unappetizing, and Inoue says the bread is so hard that her jaw hurts. After that, the two sit in heavy silence, neither of them knowing what else to say in the grim cell. The tension leaves them both breathing hard and sweating as the oppressive situation begins to wear them down. Haruki and Inoue stammer in confusion, both realizing the situation may be far worse than they thought as she anxiously asks what this is. As they look at the liquid before them, Haruki grimly guesses they may have been drugged with something that stirs dangerous impulses, and Inoue falls silent. Overwhelmed by the pressure, Haruki asks if she can still hold on, while Inoue calls the whole situation the worst and demands to know what anyone could possibly be trying to achieve. Sweating and visibly shaken, Haruki admits that, honestly, he does not think he can endure much more. Inoue, flushed and exhausted behind her glasses, quietly says she feels the same and thinks she has almost reached her limit. In a sudden, desperate movement, Haruki lunges toward her, and she recoils in shock as the tense atmosphere finally breaks. Startled by his own action, Haruki freezes while Inoue protests that she cannot agree to this, then nervously adds that they should at least do it properly, and Haruki says he will do his best. With trembling fingers, Haruki reaches toward her face and carefully removes her glasses. Seeing her clearly for the first time, Haruki is stunned as Inoue's expression softens and her appearance leaves him speechless. Haruki, completely overwhelmed, realizes he is in serious trouble now and internally admits that without her glasses, Inoue looks like a different person. Inoue shyly asks him to call her by name, but when Haruki moves closer, she flusters and tells him to wait. The two end up collapsing together on the bed as the tense moment overtakes them, and the scene fades into exhausted silence inside the cell. Their rest is cut short when armored guards suddenly storm in, strike the floor with their weapons, and bark at them to wake up. The guards leave fresh clothes and breakfast behind, ordering them to wipe themselves down and change. Sitting apart again, Haruki wonders what their captors are actually trying to accomplish, while Inoue admits it makes no sense to her either. Now changed and seated in silence, Haruki and Inoue can only stare ahead, both still drained and uneasy from everything that has happened. Inoue anxiously asks whether the food might be drugged too, and Haruki says he is not sure, but decides they should at least drink the water so it does not go to waste. A wooden cup suddenly slips and clatters across the floor, breaking the uneasy stillness between them. Realizing even the water has been tampered with, Inoue collapses in frustration and says this is the worst, while Haruki bitterly notes that of course their captors drugged that too. As the cell falls quiet again, Haruki reflects that they have already been trapped there for a full week with no sign of release. Inoue awkwardly apologizes, then nervously asks who would take responsibility if she ended up pregnant, making the moment suddenly heavy. Before Haruki can process her words, armored guards slam the door open, shout for them to come out, and announce that there will be no breakfast today. As they are escorted away, Haruki notes that the situation finally seems to be moving forward. Haruki and Inoue are brought into a large hall packed with many other captives, and both react with surprise at the sheer number of people gathered there. Seeing the crowd, Haruki realizes everyone appears to be safe, and he feels relieved by that. Even so, Haruki cannot treat the scene as something to celebrate, sensing that the atmosphere is far from reassuring. A man in a dark cloak steps forward, thanks everyone for waiting, and introduces himself as Ollier Olga Katrigs. Haruki immediately recognizes the title of Chancellor and, unnerved by the man's sharp presence, thinks he looks cunning like a serpent. The man formally declares that he is the Chancellor of the Galtera Kingdom. He then continues by saying that, according to the report, he has something further to address. The Chancellor says that over the past week, they seem to have spent their time with each other, and he coldly remarks that he is glad to hear it, leaving the captives confused. Haruki realizes with alarm that this means the other captives were also confined and drugged. The Chancellor states that they are probably wondering why such a thing was done to them. He explains that they must first understand they are now in another world, one completely different from the one they came from, and the group reacts in shock. The Chancellor adds that they were summoned for a simple reason: to help his country. The captives murmur uneasily, with some protesting that they are only ordinary high school students and have no special powers to offer. The Chancellor says he knows they have many questions, but asks them to chant a command first, promising that it will answer most of what they want to know. As the crowd remains tense and uncertain, Haruki follows the instruction and says the command to open. A glowing status panel suddenly appears before Haruki, showing his name, age, class as samurai, and a unique skill, startling both him and Inoue. Staring at the panel, Haruki is left in disbelief as he reads his own information and unique skill. The Chancellor explains that their status is shown numerically in this world, with points divided among attributes based on class, and adds that their aptitude, compatibility with partners, and other traits were already evaluated when they arrived. Haruki is left wide-eyed and shaken as he processes the explanation, while Inoue quietly reflects that this status system is what they are dealing with. The speaker says the most important part is not the unique skill, then explains that a magic circle gave them language conversion so they could understand this world, and asks them to consider something else first. He adds that they also implanted additional powers at the same time, stressing that each of those abilities is unique and belongs only to its holder. Haruki recalls learning later that otherworlders were repeatedly summoned and used in dangerous transfers between worlds, and that some hosts could not endure the burden and died, while his own body survived, likely because of his background in classical Japanese literature. The Chancellor finally reaches the main point and declares that this world gives birth to many beings called monsters, harmful creatures that attack humans, and says the summoned students were brought there to exterminate them. The class reacts with disbelief, comparing it to a low-level fantasy game and questioning how ordinary high schoolers could possibly solve a monster problem. The explanation continues that unique skills are abilities meant for killing monsters, and that if a person combines class powers with a unique skill, they can become strong enough to defeat them. He further states that defeating a monster grants experience points. He explains that the more monsters they defeat, the stronger they become, because experience directly raises physical attributes and can also be spent to improve abilities or activate skills, something only summoned people in this world can do. The Chancellor explains that no one can escape the control of the system, calling it the God of this world, and adds that although the laws of this world are only partly understood, everything possible is governed by that system. He calmly concludes his explanation and says that is all from him, adding that he looks forward to seeing their achievements. Haruki and Inoue are left stunned, realizing they were suddenly summoned and simply ordered to fight, and they can barely believe that was the whole explanation. Before the moment can settle, someone from the group forcefully calls out for the Chancellor to wait. A furious student demands to know why they have to do such a thing, and accuses the others of basically kidnapping them and having no right to order them around. Haruki recognizes the loud student as Sanada Kuki and the girl beside him as Ando Yuki, noting that Sanada is unusually tall and known for karate, while also realizing those two had been confined in the same cell. As Sanada fumes, Haruki thinks it is a bad idea to provoke the Chancellor in this situation, especially since the man seems too detached to care. Sanada snaps that if the Chancellor understands their anger, then he should release them, and the Chancellor coolly admits that they were indeed summoned without consent and asked to work. The Chancellor refuses to free them, but says he can reward them according to their achievements, leaving the group confused. He then offers what he considers compensation, saying he can grant them time to spend safely with someone dear to them. The Chancellor coldly orders them to remove their clothes, and Sanada reacts in disbelief at what he is hearing. Yuki suddenly loses control of her body and trembles in panic, realizing she is moving on her own. Yuki, overwhelmed and sweating, begs him not to look, while Sanada shouts her name in shock. The Chancellor explains that they installed a feature in the magic circle. He says that feature would turn the summoned girls into tools bound to this world, making Sanada flare up. He declares that, as shown before them, his orders are absolute to the girls. Sanada and the others stare in stunned horror as the class realizes the girls can be controlled against their will. Haruki grasps the Chancellor's real aim and realizes this is the worst outcome, while Inoue looks on in tense silence. Haruki realizes the Chancellor is using their partners as hostages, while another student bitterly notes that even brief forced closeness would make that bond feel painfully real. The Chancellor promises that as long as they meet the quota, the soldiers will not touch the girls and each pair will be given a room to spend time together safely. Haruki realizes that if he fails to meet the quota, the soldiers could harm Inoue, and they both go rigid with fear. The Chancellor says they are dismissed for now, and tells them to ask the experts if they still have questions, assuming they understand the situation now. A panicked student begs for forgiveness and says he was wrong, desperately asking them to let Uni put her clothes back on. The Chancellor coldly refuses and says this is what happens when someone defies him. He adds that they should remember this for the rest of the day as he leaves the room under guard. The captives sit in shaken silence as the soldiers loom behind them, and the room stays heavy with fear after the warning. Later, Haruki and Inoue are placed alone in a room together while the long-guarded hallway outside emphasizes their confinement. Inoue says the situation has become serious, and Haruki quietly agrees. Inoue grimly notes that under these conditions, the women are at a complete disadvantage and that the situation is truly terrible. Haruki reasons that to avoid retaliation, the women will have to keep the men under control as best they can, since the men might intentionally miss the quota to punish them whether success is possible or not. Inoue says that from now on, she will use everything she has, even her body and heart, to support Haruki. Haruki suddenly pulls Inoue close, refusing to hand her over to anyone, and she freezes in shock as he calls her name. Haruki declares that Inoue is already his woman and vows that he will not let any man touch her. Still in his arms, Inoue blushes and quietly accepts his words while Haruki falls silent beside her. Inoue realizes Haruki must have noticed how depressed she was, and she is moved that he is trying to comfort her with a gentler side she did not expect. She reflects that although Haruki seemed unreliable at first, he may truly be able to protect her, that they are well suited, and that she might actually be lucky. As the mood softens, Haruki leans over her and calls Shizuka by name while she answers in a breathless voice. Their distance closes, and when Haruki hesitates, Inoue softly tells him that she does not mind. Under the night sky, Inoue encourages Haruki to do his best too, saying she will support him and that a man grows stronger when he has someone to protect. The scene shifts to a title page announcing that they will now be taught how to draw the power of their class, the power that will decide their fate in the other world. Haruki hears that his class is samurai, and the reveal immediately captures his full attention. The instructor explains that in this world they can create powers, weapons, and armor according to their class, just as the kingdom soldiers gain their roles from soldier classes. Following the demonstration, someone activates dress form, and a burst of light engulfs the body as equipment begins to materialize. When the light clears, a fully armored knight stands there with a sword, showing that class power has taken visible form. The armored figure declares that this is how it is done and orders the captives to try it for themselves. One after another, the students raise their hands and activate their class powers, filling the chamber with pillars of light as they summon their gear. As the transformations finish, the room erupts in surprise when different kinds of equipment appear, and Haruki reacts in confusion at the unexpected results. Haruki is stunned to find himself dressed in a Shinsengumi-style uniform, and he anxiously asks what this is supposed to mean. The others stare at him in disbelief, with some muttering that it really is Shinsengumi, while an armored student awkwardly echoes the same thought. Haruki complains that they should have explained this sooner, and the instructor warns that the created equipment is based on each person's imagination and cannot be changed once formed, so they must choose carefully. Haruki awkwardly asks if this really looks fine, while the others bluntly tell him not to look at them too much, and insist his Shinsengumi look is surprisingly fitting. The explanation continues that once people in this world reach 15, they receive a class at the temple and choose a selected skill, much like an old ritual from Haruki's world, and this is said to be what they were just taught after their equipment check. They are told that tapping the selected skill section on the status window shows a list of skills they can choose from, and that every class comes with one unique skill plus one selected skill chosen by the user. As Haruki reels in confusion, the instructor warns everyone that once a skill is chosen, it cannot be changed, so they must decide very carefully. Haruki decides to postpone his choice until he understands what suits him best, while someone notices that Sanada has apparently picked a skill at random. The armored guards order them to inspect their equipment carefully and announce that today's quota is 10 goblins because they are being sent out to subjugate monsters. As they check their gear, it becomes clear that each person has a weapon matching their class, and one observer quietly notes this while examining the equipment. One classmate strains dramatically with his weapon, and another dryly remarks that someone is clearly overdoing it. Haruki decides to inspect his own weapon too, and the moment he starts checking it, something ships with a sharp sound. The blade suddenly extends, and both Haruki and the girl beside him freeze in shock at the unexpected change. As Haruki unsheathes the blade, he feels his mind suddenly shift, and he stares in confusion at what is happening. The moment he holds the katana, Haruki realizes it is his first time wielding one, yet it feels strangely natural in his hands. Almost by instinct, Haruki swings the katana in rapid arcs, moving with startling speed as the others watch the sudden display. Haruki senses that he can cut through all kinds of things, and the blade feels almost perfectly suited to him. He wonders if everyone else is experiencing the same thing, then reasons that maybe this is normal since it is a weapon he created himself. The group is suddenly ordered to head out at once and follow, and Haruki can only react with awkward surprise. As they move, Haruki decides he will think about the strange feeling from his weapon later. The entire unit rushes out in a chaotic advance, charging together toward the battlefield beyond. A classmate screams and brings his weapon down with force, launching a reckless attack as the fight erupts around them. Haruki notices the goblins are barely dodging at all, while another student panics, curses, and desperately yells at them to stop avoiding his attacks. Haruki notices that while everyone else is fighting, none of them seem able to handle their weapons as naturally or effectively as he can. He realizes the monsters were deliberately chosen as beginner targets, since goblins are apparently the weakest kind, and even ordinary people in this world can exterminate them. Meanwhile, Haruki stays calm and cuts down a goblin in a single swift strike. After finishing his quota of 10 goblin kills, Haruki focuses on getting a better feel for his weapon. He learns that when monsters die, their bodies break into particles and disappear, becoming something called magic energy that spreads through the air and can gather to form new monsters. Setting that aside, Haruki stands with his drawn katana and quietly reflects on what he has done. He realizes that he is capable of killing them. He expected to feel far more reluctance, but instead he recognizes himself as someone who can kill living creatures without that hesitation. Around him, everyone is forced to confront the same reality, and even those who hesitate or feel disgust are pressured by the soldiers to kill goblins until the first day's quota is met. Sanada has a particularly hard time, collapsing in exhaustion and breathing heavily as Haruki notices his struggle. Night falls over the fortress-like building as the scene shifts into a private and uneasy moment. Shizuka leans close to Haruki and shyly tells him that she chose a skill as her selected ability that day, leaving him startled. She explains that the skill lets her absorb a man's released energy and turn it into strength, then says that with it, he can love her as many times as he wants. Haruki awkwardly jokes that the skill makes her sound like a succubus, and when he asks if she chose it for his sake, she bashfully admits that she did. The two share an intimate moment, and the atmosphere turns deeply emotional and close. But things do not go the way they expected, because once Shizuka converts his energy into power, her eyes light up with dangerous excitement. As the pressure intensifies, Haruki apologizes to Shizuka and admits he cannot keep going, while she reacts with surprised disappointment. With his consciousness fading, his hand moves on instinct toward the status interface, searching for a way out. Drenched in sweat and nearly delirious, Haruki notices a skill called Semen Abundance that can convert experience points into vitality, and he stares at it in desperation. Before passing out, he feels that what he did was probably wrong, but lets the thought go as his mind gives in. Haruki lies there exhausted and decides to leave the consequences for his tomorrow self as the room falls into heavy silence. By the third chapter, morning arrives over the castle-like building after the unsettling night. Haruki realizes Shizuka seems satisfied, but he breaks down in frustration and admits he actually went through with it, then bitterly reflects that he can no longer laugh at Sanada, that he wasted his precious selected skill on this desperate situation, and that the so-called skill only helps him endure at night. Haruki explains that he now has a body capable of keeping up with Shizuka for a long time, though he says it with mixed feelings and she listens quietly while he trails off. After a tense pause, Shizuka softly tells him she guesses it is fine, easing the awkward mood a little. A few days pass, and since there is no daily subjugation, everyone is ordered to keep training in the castle courtyard, while the rule remains to exterminate goblins only when they are in proper condition. At the same time, the girls are made to help with chores and are ordered to use the slave-maid dress form while they work. Haruki notes that the total experience from killing goblins was only around 20, barely enough to raise a single stat by 1 or 2 points, and he observes that several people use their recent gains to improve their status. As training continues, the gap in power becomes obvious when one fighter unleashes a much stronger technique than before. Haruki reasons that if someone originally had 5 in strength, raising it by 2 would boost their power dramatically, and he notices that Sanada seems to have poured all of his points into strength, changing significantly from just 1 or 2 increases. Haruki watches Sanada struggle with his weapon at first, but notes that Sanada still manages to get used to it anyway. Haruki reflects that unlike against his classmates, he did not need much effort in his last subjugation because he simply swung his sword and things were cut down, so he decided to stock up on more experience points. Haruki reminds himself that he needs experience points to activate Summon Abundance anyway. Haruki quietly reveals that over the past 5 days, almost all of his experience points were transferred to Inoue Shizuka through an inappropriate method, and he notes that Semen Abundance and Semen Suction are compatible skills. Haruki recalls that by the 3rd subjugation, he was already cutting through enemies in a single sweeping motion. As he fights, Haruki confirms one important thing to himself. Haruki realizes with quiet surprise that he is strong. Haruki explains that this time, the subjugation target was orcs, which are treated as strong monsters in this world, and he notes that only half the class could hunt them properly, though he cleared his quota rather quickly. Haruki concludes that he probably has the highest kill count, and even after reaching his quota, he kept quietly helping his classmates while farming more experience points, all while still having no real stat value to speak of. Haruki realizes this ability seems to work especially on orcs, and when he draws his sword, he gets a strange certainty that he can cut through anything he feels he can cut. Haruki confirms that he is stronger than the rest of his classmates, though he still cannot judge how he compares to the people of this world and remains unsure what that truly means. While cutting down orcs, Haruki reflects that there is still too much he does not know, so for now he decides to focus only on hunting orcs. After the subjugation ends, it is announced that 3 people failed to meet the quota. Seeing the failed students terrifies Haruki because he realizes Shizuka could have ended up the same way. Haruki decides he has to take the subjugation seriously, because even if he believes he can protect her, the reality in front of him is still deeply unsettling. Haruki notices that Shizuka seems unusually drained and unsteady that day. As the mood turns awkward, Haruki understands that someone must have failed the quota, while Shizuka weakly pleads for what she has to offer not to be given to anyone else. Training continues intensely in the yard as the students clash with weapons under strict supervision. A stern instructor confronts Haruki and snaps that he is slacking. Haruki apologizes and admits he overdid it the previous night, which made him late for training. The instructor angrily says he will correct Haruki's attitude and orders him to draw his sword immediately. Haruki reluctantly agrees and says this kind of thing used to happen in sports, where he would get pushed around until he could barely stand. Haruki quietly thinks this might be a good chance to test his own strength. As they face each other, Haruki reasons that this duel should reveal how effective his ability is, since without unique skills or status values, he should not be able to match a veteran instructor said to be among the strongest in the country. The exchange ends instantly as Haruki's strike lands with overwhelming force, leaving the instructor staggering. Haruki stares in shock as the soldiers panic around their collapsed captain, while someone blurts out that the man was unbelievably weak. As the guards support their fallen captain, Haruki nervously says he is glad he struck with the back of his sword, because otherwise it would have been much worse, then anxiously asks whether the soldiers of this country are really that weak. Realizing the chaos he caused, Haruki rushes over and repeatedly apologizes while asking if the captain is all right. The onlookers can only stare in stunned silence at what just happened. A girl asks Haruki whether he came from a world where men grow stronger the more they sleep with women. Shizuka says the settings are too mixed together for her to even understand the source, and Haruki asks if that is really true. Looking at their status screens, Haruki notes that both of them have gained a lot of experience points, though he admits he still does not fully understand them. While Shizuka suggests that the more time she spends with him, the stronger he seems to become. Shizuka adds that fighting stronger people in this country might help them understand it better, but she remains uneasy because Haruki's true strength is still unclear. Haruki, flustered, says he would rather stay close to Shizuka than do something scary, and the mood turns playfully awkward. Under the night sky, the scene shifts as time passes over the royal buildings. Elsewhere, a stern man reacts with immediate interest to the words special grade. An attendant presents a report and nervously explains that the matter is not yet confirmed. The report explains that in the Galterra kingdom, special grade is rare and that such a person is said to possess power comparable to an entire army, making the difference between victory and defeat. After reading, the man reflects that even Sir Galveston had been taken down in a single hit and says this is not something an ordinary summoned person should be capable of. He considers the report and says it makes him suspect Haruki could be a candidate, but he also warns that only a month has passed since the summoning. Many promising candidates have faded quickly, and brief bursts of unusual power are not uncommon. The attendant excuses himself and says he will report back if anything else happens, while the seated man decides to wait and see how things develop. The door suddenly opens, breaking the room's tense silence. A cat-eared woman bursts in and casually asks whether what she just did was really okay, catching the others off guard. The man coldly tells her she is returned and reminds her not to enter his room without permission, while she brushes it off with a playful apology and the moment turns awkward. She points out that a neighboring country has already discovered its third special grade and asks why he is still not testing the new candidate, but he tells her to wait for now. She argues that without him this country would have collapsed long ago, then bluntly criticizes the king and prince as incompetent and says the other special grade candidates are worthless. She presents a recommendation naming herself as the country's only special grade and declares that she already has the perfect plan to raise the next special grade. Looking at the document, he reacts in disbelief and asks whether she has lost her mind. Smiling confidently, she explains that sending candidate Kun instead would save her the trouble, because the mission does not truly require a special grade, though ordinary soldiers would suffer too many losses. After a long silence, he admits that at this rate they desperately need someone capable of handling work at that level, though he notes she already has too much on her plate. She agrees to the proposal, saying it should lighten her burden a little. The cat-eared woman points out that asking a new soldier to subjugate an orc lord is still extreme, while the man remarks that there is no decency left in the world. The story shifts focus to Inoue Shizuka, describing her as a fundamentally calculating woman. Shizuka reflects that even setting aside the fact that she had been drugged, she accepted Ito Haruki so he would protect her, and she chose a skill meant to help her avoid pregnancy. She explains that she wore thick glasses and an oversized uniform to avoid jealousy and bullying from her classmates. A man calls out to her and bluntly addresses her as woman. The man invites her to his room and says he will take good care of her, making the moment feel improper. Shizuka calmly refuses, saying no thanks, while the man complains that unlike him, she cannot hide her figure with that uniform. As she looks troubled, the man angrily asks whether she knows who he is and warns that refusing his invitation is like being tired of living. A knight steps in and respectfully tells the man to stop, explaining that Shizuka is His Excellency's guest and not a maid. Shizuka blushes and quietly thanks the knight, while he brushes it off and says it is simply his duty. As the knight stands guard nearby, Shizuka reflects that without Haruki's protection that knight would never have stepped in, and she realizes that in situations like this, having protection matters even if she dislikes depending on Haruki. She admits that she already feels attachment and fondness toward Haruki, and decides that if those feelings keep growing, he may become important to her, which is why she wants to support him as best she can. Shocked by her own thoughts, Shizuka realizes that was what she had been thinking. A looming monster is shown as the narration warns that things stayed that way only until a certain day. Later, several covered wagons travel across the open land. While riding in one of the wagons, the samurai girl asks Shizuka whether she remembers their classmate Nitu Tsukasa. Shizuka repeats the name in surprise, and the girl says that is not surprising because he had been the quietest boy in class. The girl continues by saying that Nitu has a special class called Hero. She explains that the Hero class is considered stronger than other classes, that heroes can choose 2 selection skills and receive blessings others do not, and that Nitu even defeated a former general who had come to inspect the training. The samurai girl explains that this mission is separate from the quota and says they are accompanying that talented hero to subjugate a group of orcs. Shizuka asks why they were told to come along, and the samurai girl admits she has no idea. As the wagons roll on, someone says the destination is still a few days away and suggests treating the journey like a relaxing trip. A fierce battle erupts as the hero charges alone into a large group of orcs and tears through their ranks. In the middle of the fight, the hero activates a skill called Limit Break. With a shout, he surges forward at overwhelming speed and cuts through the orcs in one sweeping assault. The narration explains that Limit Break is one of the hero's unique skills, raising the user's physical abilities beyond normal limits. But after it ends, the body suffers greatly and the user must rest for 30 minutes after entering a super mode for 3 minutes. Watching the hero dominate the front line, the samurai girl realizes this is the hero's skill and remarks that when he takes the vanguard like that, he really does look like a hero, though she also calls the hero class absurdly overpowered. Looking at Shizuka, the samurai girl says her own abilities seem even more unfair, pointing out that Shizuka can already cut anything and asking what her samurai unique skill is. Shizuka answers that her unique skill is Shukuchi, while her class is samurai and one of her selected skills is semen abundance. The narration explains that Shukuchi is the samurai's unique skill, activated by will and allowing instant movement within 1 to 30 meters, while only costing Haruki 1 experience point per use and becoming useless for most other samurai because their points would drop too sharply. Shizuka realizes that if she uses Shukuchi the moment monsters appear in the distance, she can strike before they even get close. The samurai girl cheerfully says she can do something like that, and assures Shizuka that she will be safe this way. As monsters fall around them, the samurai girl says Shizuka's class feels even more unfair because she does not stand out, yet still has the highest kill count, though she adds that saving the other girls proves the result makes sense. While cutting through enemies, the samurai girl says the hero's limit break is excessive and admits it may work well against a single strong foe, but is not suited for a large horde. In the middle of the chaotic battle, she notes that she does not get experience points from kills here and asks whether fighting this many monsters is normal every day, while others admit they have never seen so many and say that without this group they would probably have died. As the fighting continues, the others complain that they are clearly just a burden and ask why they were even told to join, while someone points out that the frontline fighters are too busy protecting themselves to have any room left to guard others. After the clash ends, the battlefield falls quiet under the night sky as the exhausted group remains scattered among the defeated monsters. Everyone sits in silence, catching their breath, too drained to say much after the long battle. As dawn approaches and the fighting finally settles, Haruki reflects that he has killed at least dozens of enemies, while Shizuka wonders how many there really were. The samurai girl says she has not slept and is stressed because of what happened today, then notes that Shizuka still seems able to fight as she heads to the lake to wash her face. Left alone by the lakeside, Shizuka tries to steady herself and lets out a small sigh of relief. When the samurai girl realizes she forgot her towel, Shizuka thanks her, and the girl says Shizuka did her best today so she will bring it over. Shizuka stands alone in the forest clearing, waiting quietly as the atmosphere around her grows uneasy. She senses that something is there, hesitates in confusion, and then suddenly reacts as a threatening sound comes from the trees. A large claw reaches toward Shizuka, making her freeze in shock. A monstrous beast lunges out of the darkness and looms directly over her. The creature lets out a terrifying roar, and Shizuka stares back in outright panic. As the beast charges forward with another furious howl, Shizuka recoils and cries out in fear. Overwhelmed, Shizuka realizes the situation is hopeless and thinks this is not something a normal human can fight. As the monster bears down on her, Shizuka is consumed by terror and becomes certain she is about to die. The samurai girl suddenly rushes in and cuts through the attack, while Shizuka can only gasp in shock. The beast collapses to the ground, and the samurai girl lands nearby with her blade raised as Shizuka remains frozen behind her. Looking at the fallen creature, the samurai girl realizes there was still another monster left, and then turns to ask if Shizuka is okay. When the samurai girl calls her name, Shizuka stays silent for a moment before weakly responding. The samurai girl awkwardly tries to reassure her, saying this is her first time facing monsters, and that it is natural if she could not handle it well. Shizuka suddenly leans into her, trembling and letting out a strained sound, while the samurai girl stiffens in surprise. As Shizuka presses closer in her shaken state, the samurai girl nervously calls out to her, clearly flustered by the unexpected contact. With a blank but intense expression, Shizuka quietly tells her to take responsibility. Startled, the samurai girl asks what she means, but Shizuka firmly repeats that she must take responsibility, and the girl hurriedly agrees. Still clinging to the samurai girl, Shizuka shyly says she would even marry her if needed, leaving the girl flustered by how serious she sounds. The samurai girl hesitates and asks Shizuka to say it clearly, and Shizuka blushes as she quietly asks for confirmation. When the samurai girl asks whether she is loved, Shizuka admits without hesitation that she does love her, which leaves the girl smiling in relief. Wrapped around her from behind, Shizuka relaxes against the samurai girl with a dreamy look, while the girl stiffens and silently endures the clingy affection. With flushed cheeks and half-lidded eyes, Shizuka calls Haruki by name and says she wants to do it, making the moment suddenly shift in direction. Shizuka realizes that in that single moment she has completely fallen for Haruki, and the force of that realization overwhelms her. Watching Haruki instantly bring down the overwhelming monster, Shizuka feels her instincts fully drawn to a powerful protector. She reflects that she had not liked Haruki before, but seeing him fight in the training grounds changed something inside her. The samurai girl stares in confusion and asks herself what that reaction was, clearly unsettled by Shizuka's sudden shift. As Haruki stands among the defeated monsters, Shizuka compares him to the so-called hero and realizes Haruki killed far more, while the hero could only stand there as everyone admired him. As Haruki faces the aftermath of battle, the so-called hero is left shaken and bitter, insisting he should have been the protagonist and begging for it to stop. The hero cannot accept what he is seeing and angrily wonders why Haruki is taking his credit, while the gap in their strength becomes impossible to ignore. From a distance, the fallen beast lies still as the others approach the scene in silence. The hero stares blankly at the defeated monster, too stunned to process Haruki's overwhelming result. In shock, he clings to the belief that this was supposed to be his mission. Overwhelmed and trembling, Shizuka calls out Haruki's name again and again as her emotions surge. Flushed and breathing hard, Shizuka admits to herself that the girl was unexpectedly cute, and that thought only deepens her confusion. Still dazed, she looks toward Haruki and tries to say his name, struggling to contain the feelings rising inside her. As she loses control and stumbles forward, a harsh inner voice tells her this is her own doing. Later, the tension gives way to a calmer moment as Haruki walks beside Shizuka along the forest path. Shizuka softly calls Haruki's name, and he turns with a puzzled look as both of them sense something unusual. As the group gathers around the fallen enemy, the crowd breaks into restless chatter as everyone reacts to the outcome. The others marvel that this is exactly what they would expect from a hero, while one identifies the corpse as an orc lord and another notes there should not have been anything like that in the forest. Shizuka quietly points out that Haruki was not the one who defeated it, and he calmly agrees. Haruki explains that this is not what people should focus on, because monsters normally disappear into particles when they die, while stronger monsters at least leave remains. Haruki bluntly says that Nito-kun is stealing the credit, and when someone asks if he is really fine with that, he simply says he guesses so. Haruki says it is fine because he is already satisfied knowing the truth, leaving Shizuka flustered beside him. He then adds that Nito will probably get dragged into something troublesome for taking the credit. Shocked, the other boy repeats the idea of a special force and can only ask if they mean him. A man confirms it and declares that he has nominated him as a special force candidate for the country, since he has enough strength to defeat an orc lord alone. The man explains that the special force determines the country's survival and orders the boy to join a unit that will take decisive action on the front lines, while the boy is stunned that this is the first he has heard of it and admits it feels dangerous. The man cuts him off and declares that he expects great things from him, while the girl awkwardly tries to say that he was not actually the one responsible. As the man walks away with the guards, the boy is left behind in confusion, wondering why this is happening. Elsewhere, a cat-like girl dismisses the supposed hero as a complete disappointment and says someone that weak could never become a special grade candidate. When asked what the truth is and whether he really defeated the orc lord, she says there is no way, that he never even went to check on them, and insists that he claimed it himself. She explains that the orc lord was killed in a single strike, and notes that even a true special grade fighter would normally struggle against an orc lord's abnormal durability. Asked what truly happened, she plainly reveals that he merely stole the credit. Delighted, she says she knew it and concludes that the real special grade candidate is the beheader who killed the orc lord. When asked why she did not identify the one who killed the orc lord, she explains that even after his credit was stolen, he said nothing and simply returned to daily life, showing he is not ambitious. The man decides to let things proceed for now, saying he will give the boy what he wants until he can draw him in with 2 or 3 more ties. The cat-like girl asks why he nominated Hiro-kun, sounding doubtful and unconvinced. The man says the boy stole someone else's credit and now has to bear the responsibility, while the girl remarks that the fool has become a scarecrow and warns that even a fake special grade candidate can still make rival nations wary. When she asks when they can use Beheader-kun, the man says it is still under investigation and that they must learn his weaknesses and prepare more chains, while she guesses the first proper chain on him is the woman he cares about because he will not act recklessly as long as she is involved. The girl asks whether that means he will get angry if something happens to the woman, then bluntly says she wants those foolish princes gone. In a brief recollection, someone says a warning has already been issued once, leaving the girl alarmed. The man tells her she already knows what must be done, and says that is why they need more chains, while she complains that she does not want to keep fighting a low special grade from one country to the death. She says she will go see him, but warns them not to expect much, while the man calmly replies that such a result is only to be expected. Elsewhere, Haruki studies his status screen and quietly thinks things over. Seeing his total, Haruki realizes he has accumulated an enormous amount of experience points. Haruki admits an orc lord is incredible but wonders what he should do with all those points, when a woman behind him calls out to him. After finishing the procedures, Haruki notes how quickly everything was completed. Shizuka blushes and shyly says that from this day onward, things will be different between them. The two cling to each other in delight, acting like newlyweds, while someone watching is stunned by how adorable the scene looks. Haruki notices that Shizuka's surname has changed and reacts in shock when he sees it on the status display. Overjoyed, Haruki says they should hurry home with Shizuka, while both of them feel blessed and say the moment makes them happy. As Haruki and Shizuka walk away together in high spirits, a cat-like girl watches them from hiding. The girl is shaken and says she has never experienced anything like this before, wondering in alarm what she just felt from him. She insists it is not simply a matter of strength or weakness, because the instant she approached him, she felt as if she would be cut down. Still hidden at the corner, she judges as a special grade that Haruki is a genuine monster. Shizuka notices a guest approaching and tells Haruki not to worry, saying it will be over soon and that he should head home first, while Haruki turns serious at the interruption. Shizuka sharply notices the hidden cat-like girl, and the intruder jumps out in alarm as she asks whether Shizuka wanted something from her. The cat-like girl panics and bolts across the floor with a startled cry, while Shizuka calmly tracks her movement. Cornered after being detected, the girl nervously demands to know how Shizuka realized she was there, and Shizuka simply responds that it was obvious. Shizuka points out that the girl's tail was sticking out, instantly exposing her hiding place. The cat-like girl freezes in humiliation and realizes her tail had stood out far too much. Shizuka asks if the girl came to speak with her, then bluntly questions how long she plans to keep such an awkward distance. Flustered and sweating, the girl admits she really did come to talk, but says she feels that if she gets any closer she might be cut down. Shizuka reacts with calm curiosity, asking whether the girl is actually quite strong if she can sense something like that. The cat-like girl apologizes for following Shizuka and for losing her composure, then explains she came on the Chancellor's errand. She says she will answer Shizuka's question as well, revealing that she is probably the strongest in the country and the only special grade there. The cat-like girl explains that she is indeed the country's only official special grade, and Shizuka realizes that this is the same title Nito was given the other day. Shizuka calmly tells her to relax because she would never cut someone down without reason, but the girl admits it is terrifying that Shizuka says that while also seeming fully capable of doing it, and she blames her own curiosity for getting her into this mess. As Shizuka casually remarks that there is a saying about curiosity killing the cat-like girl erupts into panic. In total alarm, the girl demands to know whether Shizuka is really going to cut or kill her, while Shizuka repeats that she would not harm anyone without reason, and the girl nervously accepts that answer. Trying to recover, the cat-like girl apologizes for getting flustered again and says she wants to ask Shizuka something. Shizuka tells her to go ahead and asks what she wants. Shizuka answers without hesitation that she wants the Chancellor's head, then adds that this is her honest conclusion. Hearing that, the cat-like girl goes pale and realizes it was already too late, concluding that Shizuka is seriously dangerous. She protests that she does not like how Shizuka has tied a rope around her neck, and Shizuka clarifies that what she truly wants is the right to cut that rope, making the girl anxiously ask whether the Chancellor has some leverage over her. The cat-like girl says she does not think anyone there could control Shizuka like that, and Shizuka quietly agrees that such a thing seems impossible. Shizuka quietly says that if he ever breaks his own rule, she wants that warning passed on to him and makes it clear she will show no mercy, leaving the cat-like girl stunned as she realizes the one holding the chain may be even more dangerous. The cat-like girl panics and says he was terrifying, insisting that simply standing before him while knowing he could kill her already exhausted her, and she blurts out that Shizuka never told her he was such a monster. Perched on the desk, the cat-like girl declares that he is no longer merely special grade but ultimate grade, and warns that he could destroy an entire country by himself. The man reacts with uneasy surprise and repeats that Haruki is really that strong, focusing on the term ultimate grade. Flustered and emphatic, the cat-like girl warns that if he ever gets angry he could wipe out a whole nation without hesitation, and she begs them never to break his chain, saying upsetting that chain would be even worse. Growing tense, the man asks her to confirm one thing and specifically wants to know whether the chain is still functioning properly. The cat-like girl nervously confirms that it is, adding that he seems to truly treasure the woman. She explains that he personally told her to warn them that he would immediately come and wipe them out if anything ever happened to the woman, then adds that he actually hates them quite a lot. Sweating with relief, the man says he understands and concludes that this information alone is enough for now. As the threat sinks in, the cat-like girl thinks that handling him would be extremely difficult because even if they keep him under control for the moment, he is still a super-grade existence capable of destroying an entire country and even comparable to an army. The cat-like girl nervously says he is unexpectedly ruthless, and the man, still sweating, concludes that if they cannot tame Haruki, rebuilding the country will be impossible and that this should at least be taken as good news. As the castle stands under the open sky, the cat-like girl tells him not to push himself too hard, and he quietly says he will keep that in mind. She reflects that something like that happened even while she was standing before the self-proclaimed strongest person in the country, a woman dressed in a cat costume. As the two lie there looking drained, she says she will behave if told to, while the woman warns that if she truly is the strongest in the country, then she could easily overthrow it. So causing trouble would make rebuilding the infrastructure difficult. A flock of bird-like monsters screeches across the battlefield as soldiers below brace themselves against the sudden assault. While the monsters cry overhead, the samurai-like fighter remains calm and notes that today is simply another day of subjugation. A giant bird dives at him with a fierce shriek, but he stands his ground without flinching. In one swift motion, he cuts through the attacking monster as it lunges, dropping it before it can reach him. He says that with that strike he has completed today's quota, then adds that since the enemies keep coming near him, he will simply keep cutting them down. As the aerial attack intensifies, the soldiers shout orders to fortify the front line, knock down the attackers so the rear guard can finish them, and make sure none of the monsters escape back into the sky. As monsters swarm the battlefield and fighters strike them down, the observer watches and admits that they are doing pretty well. It is explained that after that, Naito and the other classmates began working together to subjugate monsters as a team, apparently because the hero class is more suited for group battles. While Nitu cuts through a flying monster, it is noted that he is doing much better than in the earlier battle against orcs, and that although it takes time, his group is steadily increasing their kill count because their leader Nitu is a special grade candidate. The cat-like girl explains that in the past he rushed in with his limit break, then had to rest and repeat the process, and she bluntly says that approach was very inefficient. As he reacts in surprise, she explains that this tactic takes advantage of the hero's unique skills, regeneration, and unyielding, making it a method specifically for fighting powerful enemies. She says she was caught off guard because intelligence work is her specialty, and normally no one would be able to notice her, while the samurai calmly says he was there and simply noticed her presence today. Flustered, she apologizes and says she is investigating the worst target ever and the most troublesome mission, while he lightly remarks that she seems to be doing some kind of intelligence work. He asks what she meant about the hero again, and she explains that the hero class is privileged because it can possess multiple skills. It is explained that one of the hero class's unique skills is limit break. Another is regeneration, which can quickly restore damage, but regeneration cannot suppress pain, so Nitu Tsukasa learned unyielding to endure that intense pain. As silhouettes of different classes appear, she explains that the hero's skills are mainly suited for group combat, and guesses that his remaining skill is probably something that also works well in coordinated battles. The cat-eared girl wonders how high his status is now, then explains that ever since he became a special grade candidate, he has been using his skill mainly to hunt orcs, and because orcs give the most experience, his status has kept rising. She says he's only been in this world for a few months and is probably still only in the low hundreds at most, then explains that the experience needed for each stat increase doubles every time, making further growth extremely difficult. As bird-like monsters are cut down in midair, she remarks that the orc lord was far stronger than those creatures, and says defeating one of these birds would only give around 100 points. Looking over her own status, she says combat is not her specialty, and that compared with the other special grades she falls short, though her stats are still above average with a strong focus on intelligence. She shyly admits she has never seen anyone with such an extraordinary reference value, while the samurai says technical measures of strength do not matter much to him because what matters is simply whether he can cut the target down. When he asks about supergrade, she says that is exactly why supergrade figures are so troublesome. She explains that special grade refers to abnormal monsters or people whose strength cannot be measured by normal standards, adding that if special grade is like an army, then super grade is on the level of an entire country or even the sky itself, and some even say several special grades still could not defeat one super grade. He reacts with mild surprise, and when she says he seems uninterested, he replies that even after hearing all that, he still has no real point of reference. She falls silent for a moment, then asks him directly how many minutes he thinks it would take to defeat her if they fought. He answers without hesitation that it would be over the instant he draws his sword. The cat-eared girl nervously asks for a break, while Haruki apologizes and she complains that staying near him is shortening her lifespan. Haruki seriously asks whether raising his stamina or status would also make him even more vigorous at night, leaving her visibly stunned. She reacts in disbelief, while Haruki insists he is serious and says the issue could affect his future marriage. After a tense pause, she explains that higher vitality would likely reduce that problem, and adds that if he became more like a normal person, he might lose interest in the opposite contact, which makes Haruki mutter that maybe he does not need high status after all. As the subjugation seems to be ending and the others celebrate in the distance, she remarks that he was worrying about something foolish, and he notes how quickly the time passed. She says she can finally move on to the main subject, insists she would not have approached him without a reason, and asks him to come with her while adding that he does not hate her that much. Reaching a large building, she apologizes for the sudden invitation but trails off as the atmosphere turns formal. Inside, a stern man says he is not as patient as he looks, and warns that if there is a pawn he can use, he will not hesitate to use it, while the cat-eared girl stands stiffly behind Haruki. The man sums up that Haruki is being asked to play a role as part of a test, and Haruki calmly confirms that understanding, while also noting the man's sharp perception. The cat-eared girl nervously comments that Haruki is handling that monster well, then warns him not to forget that he could be killed instantly if he offends him. The stern man says the great chancellor would never assign a job without reward, then assures Haruki he will compensate him properly depending on the task. Haruki calmly says that would benefit him as well because knowing the man's capabilities would make many things easier later, and he pointedly repeats that many things would become easier. The stern man says he also hopes to build a good relationship with Haruki, again stressing that it is for many reasons. Haruki gets straight to the point and asks what exactly the man wants him to do. The man bluntly reveals his request and says he wants Haruki to kill someone. Haruki immediately identifies the request as an assassination, while the cat-eared girl in the background grows uneasy as the situation begins to feel dangerous. The man coolly repeats that it is an assassination, and when asked about the Chancellor's mysterious request, he adds that he will use the reward to pay Haruki as much as his authority allows. Haruki asks for the target's location and how they confirmed the mark, while the cat-eared girl protests that the demand is absurd, but the stern man silences her and says she will carry out that task. After hearing the details, Haruki calmly says he will accept the job. Haruki then asks if his partner can come too, and the stern man tells him he does not mind and to do as he wishes. A horse pulls the wagon steadily along the rough road as the group continues toward the city. Inside the wagon, the cat-eared girl looks flustered and overwhelmed as the moment turns awkward and uncomfortable. Riding in the wagon, the cat-eared girl tries to steady herself while the horse keeps moving, and her dazed expression shows she is still shaken. As the wagon rolls on, the cat-eared girl admits that the whole situation feels unbelievably unreal. The walled city finally comes into view, showing that they have reached their destination. After arriving in town, Haruki and the cat-eared girl stop outside a building and quietly assess the area. From inside, the cat-eared girl spots the man and tells Haruki that the one seated in the middle with a woman attending him is the target, while Haruki listens in silence. Looking at the target, the women around him wonder if he is some kind of spy, and the cat-eared girl explains that he was once their country's special-grade candidate before being taken by another nation and becoming a troublesome enemy spy. The cat-eared girl asks Haruki how he plans to handle it and whether he thinks he can win, while Haruki remains calm and thoughtful. Haruki studies the situation and remarks that, unlike the others he has met, this man seems like the hardest one to approach or take down. The cat-eared girl agrees and admits Haruki is already too much even for her, then concludes that they need to think of a way to kill him. Haruki suddenly tells her they should just go home, leaving her confused by the abrupt shift. As they step outside, the cat-eared girl looks ahead in surprise and notices unrest spreading through the plaza. A violent strike erupts nearby, sending civilians into panic as people scream and recoil from the sudden attack. The cat-eared girl freezes in shock, while Haruki stays calm and turns toward the disturbance. She realizes with a chill that she had been foolish because what Haruki called hard to cut only meant something as trivial to him as slicing through fruit. The cat-eared girl admits she needs to stop judging Haruki by her own standards, while he remains expressionless. As Haruki looks ahead in thought, The cat-eared girl starts rethinking everything about him. Haruki reflects that even when he killed a person for the first time, he did not feel anything. Looking over the empty landscape, Haruki dismisses the matter and decides it does not really matter anyway. A few days later, the scene shifts to the Galterra kingdom. The audience hall is introduced as the place where the king meets visitors and where hospitality is offered to people from other countries. Today, the hall is preparing for a welcome ceremonial for the neighboring Sandra kingdom. As Haruki stands there with a blank expression, he quietly wonders why he is even here. The cat-eared girl tells Haruki he only needs to stand there, explaining that his presence alone will ease the Chancellor's tension and help the negotiations go more smoothly, since he is basically like a strategic weapon. Haruki states that he does not think people should be treated like weapons, and the cat-eared girl replies that he could easily kill everyone here, so there is no real difference. A man agrees that this is true and says there is no harm in doing at least that much, adding that if the job goes well, the Chancellor will be pleased and Haruki can expect rewards. As the doors open and guards react, someone announces that they have arrived. The delegation and its armed escort begin entering the hall in an orderly procession. The cat-eared girl explains that the group now entering consists of the delegation party and their escort unit. A monstrous, heavily muscled figure appears with the delegation, radiating menace and instantly disrupting the atmosphere in the hall. The cat-eared girl reacts in disbelief that such a being was brought here, while Haruki notes that something clearly not human has been mixed in with the delegation. As the creature is dismissed as garbage, Haruki asks the cat-eared girl whether that thing is human, and she explains that beings like it are indeed still considered human and are called garbage. It is explained that unwanted summoners are cast into the demon realm, where monsters appear endlessly, and to survive they hunt, eat, and kill until the survivors become beings known as garbage, with only a tiny survival rate and a rule against using them as inhuman weapons that is often ignored. The cat-eared girl says the creature has been sealed with magic and can be unsealed at any time, while Haruki worries that it may go out of control and remarks that whoever brought it here does not seem sane. Seeing the hostile posture of the armed visitors, Haruki realizes they are openly trying to start a fight. The cat-eared girl concludes that this is likely to become a war, explaining that the Sandra Kingdom recently gained 3 special grades, has grown overconfident, and likely wants to seize their nation's fertile land because relations were never very close. Haruki asks whether countries really go to war that easily, and the cat-eared girl answers that war is common enough that there is no doubt about it. It is revealed that the enemy plans to unleash that creature inside the country, create chaos at the center, and then use the confusion to gather a large army and invade. Haruki says they need to stop that from happening, but when asked whether he thinks he can defeat the monster, the cat-eared girl bluntly admits she cannot because she is not a combat specialist. The cat-eared girl says the suspicious man is making his move, admits Haruki's resolve to act surprised her, and after hearing Shizuka and the others want to change their current situation, Haruki decides he cannot let the Chancellor die. Haruki bluntly tells the cat-eared girl that she is charging in head-on, leaving her staring at him in shock. As the cat-eared girl angrily asks whether Haruki is telling her to die over such a vague statement, he calmly says he will do something about it. A sudden explosive roar interrupts them, and both react in alarm. The sealed monster breaks loose with overwhelming force and slams into the ground, violently tearing through the area. Seeing the creature already rampaging, Haruki asks whether she plans to handle it herself according to her plan, and the cat-eared girl panics at the thought. The cat-eared girl throws herself forward anyway, shouting that she will curse Haruki even after death if she dies because of this. She rushes straight at the monster through the shattered corridor, trying to intercept it before it can cause more damage. The monster instantly turns on her with terrifying speed, and she freezes in shock as she realizes it has already closed the distance. Overwhelmed, the cat-eared girl admits she cannot dodge or block an attack from an opponent with stats over 100, and in despair she concludes it is impossible. The cat-eared girl is thrown into confusion as the monster's strike tears past her, and she can only react in stunned disbelief. She falls silent in shock while a sudden impact lands nearby, leaving her frozen for a moment. Haruki calmly signals her to hurry and move, cutting through her panic with a simple command. Feeling foolish for losing her nerve, she regains herself and rushes forward through the wreckage toward the monster. In a violent clash, the monster is struck down with overwhelming force before it can finish its attack. As the creature collapses, she stares at the result in disbelief, unable to process how quickly it was decided. She admits that even with her poor knife, killing the monster by simply taking its head should not have been enough, so the outcome feels completely unnatural to her. The crowd erupts in cheers behind her, and she turns around in surprise at the sudden celebration. The people praise her as the special grade hero who saved the country, leaving her overwhelmed as their admiration pours in. Flustered, she insists they have it wrong, and explains that the one who defeated the monster was him, not her. Surrounded by the cheering crowd, the cat-eared girl panics as people press in on her from every side and call out to her all at once. Completely overwhelmed, the cat-eared girl complains that all the troublesome matters were dumped onto her, and her frustration spills out as the crowd keeps closing in. Watching from the side, Inoue Shizuka feels a little sorry for the cat-eared girl as the people celebrate the birth of a great hero who saved the country. The man thanks Inoue Shizuka and explains that they were at least able to hide the existence of a supergrade, while she realizes he had noticed all along. He states that they are questioning the messenger, but says this is clearly an active invasion, and because of the other side's actions he can no longer back down, while Inoue Shizuka reacts with weary disbelief. As armies surge into chaos, the conclusion becomes unavoidable, and the conflict is declared to be war, raising the question of what Haruki will do to protect his peaceful life. Later, the cat-eared girl lies exhausted in bed and admits she was praised as a hero and bombarded with questions, saying she wants to avoid going out in public for a while. Looking over the kingdom, the cat-eared girl asks if this really means war, and he answers that they will announce the truth even if Sanada will likely deny it, because the world will judge by the victor and the enemy's bold move shows they intended to fight. The cat-eared girl anxiously wonders whether they can really win, and admits that they are clearly underprepared. After a brief silence, he calmly assures her that winning will be easy. The cat-like girl asks whether he intends to send that man to the front, then warns that if they are labeled a genocidal nation, even victory would destroy the country, and the war would become a one-sided massacre, while he simply agrees. He sums it up by saying it all depends on how they use him, and notes that fortunately they summon someone who has not attracted attention. With chilling calm, he says that if they secretly kill the enemy commander, no one would complain, and adds that in the best case they could wipe out all the enemy special grades guarding that commander and instantly overturn the balance of power, leaving the cat-like girl unsettled by how cruel he sounds. He concludes that this is the plan, and says he wants Haruki to join the war as part of a hidden unit. The cat-like girl complains that this is a pain, then says she does feel a little bad, but insists he owes her for forcing that honor on her and tells him to stop complaining and follow her instructions. As they walk, he casually mentions that defeating the giant earned him a huge amount of experience and asks whether fighting non-monster opponents also gives experience points, while the cat-like girl reacts that his way of thinking is not exactly reassuring. He reflects on the word system, remembering that the Chancellor mentioned it long ago, and notes that the moment someone loses reason, the system already judges that person as a monster, suggesting there may be something meaningful behind it. The explanation continues that a mysterious great being is said to have created the system, and that this entity assigns classes to humans across the world and watches over them, though despite supposedly holding immense power, almost nothing is known about it. The cat-like girl tells him to focus on the war, explaining that he is allowed to kill enemy foot soldiers but must work behind the scenes to assassinate the enemy commander and special grades, then admits she cannot tell which enemies are special grade just by looking and says he should target the ones who seem strongest. Still expressionless, he asks what a strong-looking enemy is even supposed to look like, and the cat-like girl trails off before saying she will just point out who he should kill. The cat-like girl explains that the mission cannot be revealed even to their allies because simple defense is not enough to justify needing him, and if they go on the offensive the other nations would see them as aggressors, while their own allies would remain focused on defense. As the battle rages, she asks whether summoned people usually take part in war, then explains that although the strongest are often ordinary soldiers, summoned ones usually take command in any nation, while warning that if they lose, he could be placed under merciless rule and his fate would depend entirely on the victors. Haruki says he understands the situation and will follow her orders since they have to win the war, and the cat-like girl gives a brief nod of approval. As the wagon rolls on, the cat-like girl casually introduces it as her partner and awkwardly says he can use the carriage however he likes, When he asks what is inside the rattling wagon, she answers that it is a cage full of monkeys and tells him not to worry about it. The moment turns intimate and tense as both of them lie there breathless and sweating in silence. Looking uneasy, the girl asks whether they can really win this war. Haruki calmly says that once the war begins, he will immediately kill the enemy commander so the chain of command collapses into chaos. Then adds that she should stay here because the Catwoman's direct subordinates will protect her and keep her safe. The two stand quietly atop the wall, watching the fortified gate and the soldiers gathered below in heavy silence. Staring out across the battlefield, the girl is shaken by the sheer number of enemy forces and wonders if there are simply too many of them. Using the battlefield layout, the cat-like girl explains that Sandra Kingdom has around 40,000 troops while Galterra has fewer than 20,000, so they are badly outnumbered and unprepared for a direct clash. She says a defensive strategy might buy time, then asks if they can really win, and Haruki answers that if he kills the enemy commander in time, the opposing army will fall into disorder. As the assault begins, armored soldiers slam a heavy ram into the city gate again and again, battering the entrance under relentless pressure. The gate gives way, and enemy troops roar forward through the breach with weapons raised as they charge into the city. While arrows and soldiers flood the battlefield, the cat-like girl says the battle has begun and tells Haruki it is time to move, while he steadies himself and repeats that everything is fine. They slip through the enemy encampment, moving past large command tents and guarded positions as they search for the commander's location. Spotting the busiest tent, Haruki asks if it is the commander's, and the cat-like girl confirms it, pointing to the steady flow of messengers going in and out as proof. Inside the command tent, the cat-like girl tells Haruki that eliminating the target is now his job. Haruki asks whether he should kill the man quickly or quietly, and she answers that doing it silently would be better, which he accepts at once. Haruki suddenly appears among the armored officers inside the tent, catching them completely off guard before they can react. One officer demands to know who he is, but Haruki moves first and unleashes a single overwhelming slash that tears through the tent and everyone around him in an instant. The shockwave races across the battlefield, cutting down large numbers of enemy soldiers at once and throwing their entire formation into chaos. Haruki says the result is the same either way and agrees that since their goal is to disrupt the chain of command, it is better to kill them all, while the cat-like girl calmly confirms it. Seeing the fallen commander, the cat-like girl remarks that Haruki really killed him effortlessly and reminds the others that this is the rumored special grade, while Haruki coolly asks if that is so. As the battlefield falls into confusion, the cat-like girl says no one is giving orders anymore and that chaos will spread soon, then declares their victory already decided, while Haruki casually says he is going home. Leaderless soldiers break formation and scatter across the battlefield, their movements collapsing into panic and disorder. Elsewhere, a man laughs to himself and realizes that this outcome was caused by having even a single super-grade fighter. Catching his breath in his office, he warns himself not to lower his guard, thinking that if the incompetent princes learned about such overwhelming power, they might try to conquer the world. He concludes that, fortunately, Haruki has no interest in fame, so he intends to hide his power from the royal family and let the nation know only as much as necessary. Still thinking deeply, he says that there is one troublesome royal family member he must consider. The office door suddenly opens, and a woman enters while politely excusing herself, startling him at once. Recognizing her immediately, he identifies her as that troublesome royal family member and, with restrained irritation, asks Her Highness to remember to knock before entering the room. The man warns that the office holds confidential information, but the second princess, Silfiera Kanu Tesla Galterra, brushes that aside, and he bitterly notes that she is the only competent one in the otherwise incompetent royal family. Silfiera immediately asks whether they have already won the war. He replies that they have only received the first report so far, and she questions whether that is true. Smiling with complete confidence, Silfiera says they have a super grade on their side, so there is no way they could lose. The man explains that this is exactly why he wants her to stop spreading inaccurate information, while Silfiera lightly apologizes for forgetting that he was keeping it secret and teasingly adds that she will not tell her father or her brothers. With a playful smile, Silfiera says it is only natural for her to want to learn more about her future husband. Left exhausted and sweating, he says he does not care about that and only begs her not to bring him any more trouble, while it is noted that the Chancellor's worries never end.